So let's remember, we were just getting a new mic. We just wanted to choose the right one. But now I'm all in. And I'm like, you know what would be really great is if we had this all set up for the new year, because we have like new podcast episodes coming. We've got some great content to record. We've got some amazing guests. You know what? Now's the time. Hello and welcome to the Service-Based Business Society podcast. I am your host, Tiffany-Ann Bottcher. On our weekly episodes, we will dig into everything you need to know about scaling your service-based business without losing sleep. Let's get started. For the first episode of 2024, you're joining us in the new studio. And if you're not checking this out on YouTube, be sure to give us a follow. The link to our channel is down in the show notes. Now, why am I saying, hey, come check us out on YouTube? Because we have a new recording studio. And that recording studio is actually the topic of today's episode, because we're going to talk all about how, as entrepreneurs, we can get distracted. This studio is a perfect example of that. Now, I'm also an advocate for lifelong learning and choosing specific things that you want to improve. But we're going to go through a little bit how it went, why I did it, and why it's a funny episode for the first episode of 2024. So, in order to learn about the studio, the decisions, and what took place over the Christmas holidays, we need to go back. And we need to go back and know that one of our Q3 going into Q4 objectives was to really level up our content creation. Now, this is pretty common in today's space. It is a lot of content required in order to be in the online business space. Now, you may say, I don't do a lot of content creation, and that's okay. But for our businesses, online marketing is a huge component to what we do. So I wanted to level up our content. It all kind of ties back into those summer plans I had. A few yeses, too many. And that plan really kind of fell off the rails. So here comes Christmas break. And I needed a new podcast mic. My mic quality, I wasn't happy with it. I wanted a new mic, but I didn't know which mic to get. I historically, when it comes to mics, have usually left it to the last minute. I know that I'm going to need a new mic. I haven't really decided. By the time I need a new mic, it's like desperate, like something has broken. And now I'm going to drive down to the local office supply store, pick up whichever one seems the best of what's on the shelf. Not a lot of planning, not a lot of organization. And really, for someone who spends so much time on Zoom, a mic is required. So I had this ad, and it kept coming onto my Instagram, and I kept seeing this same guy talking about audio quality, video quality, and how just in a few simple steps, you too could have very professional looking video audio quality. And I thought, well, that sounds simple. That sounds simple enough. And so, there be the start of the process. Go back, I'd saved the ad. I go to the piece and I think, I don't really want to spend the money, but I do really want to buy the right thing this time. So buy the course. The course is called On-Screen Authority. I highly recommend for anyone who spends time on camera, on mic, that wants to really level up their content. Now, if you're thinking, Tiffany-Ann, you don't sound very good. I would never take a course to make it. This is the very first day. I digress. Let me tell the story. So, number one, don't measure the success of the program by what you're listening to today, because this is a work in progress and the story will convey this. So, we needed a new mic. Start listening to the program, and it is broken down into some very incredible steps. We've got composition, which is like the layout of the room. We've got lighting. We've got mic. We've got camera. We've got teleprompter. We've got all of these different things. And each of them are broken into sections as to how do you use them? How do they apply? Why are they important? Which equipment they recommend. So I get out my notebook and I'm like, okay, composition, we need to make some changes. Lighting, a few changes. Camera, I'm not going to bother right now. I really just need that mic. So, let's get the mic sorted out, go through the whole program. And I start ordering stuff on Amazon. And pretty much like a few days after Christmas, now packages are arriving at our front door at an alarming rate. And my husband is like, what are we doing? And I was like, so I signed up with this course, I wanted to get the new mic. And so he's kind of side-eyeing me because I won't lie, there's a lot of packages. Also because Amazon, have you ever noticed that sometimes they use like a really big box for a really little item? And you're like, I don't really know that this is necessary. I think that this might be a little overzealous. And they also put only like one thing per package. So I needed a few adapters. They were like these little cords, just a few inches long, patch cables and this and that. And so they're all arriving in one-off packages. But one of the key pieces that I took from the course was that we needed to adjust where I was filming and the direction I was filming. And ultimately my office didn't really have the right layout. Cue a trip to IKEA. So let's remember, we were just getting a new mic. We just wanted to choose the right one. But now I'm all in. And I'm like, what would be really great is if we had this all set up for the new year, because we have like new podcast episodes coming. We've got some great content to record. We've got some amazing guests. You know what? Now's the time. So I say to my husband, here's the problem. My office is really not wide enough the way that I have my desk configured. And so, he says, no problem. We can turn the desk. So he and I are kind of talking about it. And it comes down to, we really need less natural light and more studio light. The program talks about how, we can control studio lighting. It's much better. And so we need to remove the window because ultimately I actually need to film the direction that the window would be behind me. If you're on YouTube, you can see I'm pointing at where the window would normally be. And so I said to my husband, I actually need there not to be a window here. And he laughs and he says, but there is a window there. And he's kind of thinking I've maybe lost it. And so I say, well, I have a plan and we're actually going to cover this window. It's not going to be permanent, but we're going to be adding some new furniture. This is what we do. And so we've covered the window. We've added in the additional distance that we need for the depth. And now it's time to get testing. I'll be honest, I could not get it all to work. I felt like I was always missing, even though I made like a perfect list from the course, everyone has different equipment. They are talking about using a Mac laptop in times. I have a Mac Studio, different ports, and I use all the ports on my computer times 5. Many of the USB-Cs have those little adapters where one turns to more. And so ultimately I'm trying to make this work, but every time I need to order something else, it needs to come from Amazon. So ultimately, the story concludes with the fact that it took way longer than I thought. And it all started with the mic. So number one, haven't really even got to do a whole lot of testing, but I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. We're no longer using a webcam. Funny story on that one. The course says I could use my iPhone for a while. And I have a great iPhone, one of the newer ones, nice camera on there. Here was the problem. I was like, we're not going to do the camera right now. We did the lights and the furniture and the this and the mic and all that. The camera's fine. Here's the problem. In order to use the setup, I could not actually reach my phone. It was like unusable while it was part of the workflow. And I was like, well, that's not going to work. So in the end, we've upgraded the camera, we've upgraded the mic, we've upgraded the studio, and we are so in for 2024. Now, why do I tell you this long-winded story about the studio and how ultimately it didn't go exactly as planned? Because as entrepreneurs, how easy is it to start to feel like you have committed a certain amount and it's too late to go back? So for me, I'm like, well, once I invested in the course, it would be silly not to follow it. So although I really just wanted a new mic, Well, we also can't ignore the lighting. And then we can't ignore the fact that the office needed. And so you start to kind of get on this, well, we've gone this far. We've gone too far to turn back. And so, my funny story really highlights the fact that even as someone who's very conscious about distraction, I talk about it often on the podcast, not getting distracted and, keeping your eye on your objective. Ultimately, it still happens to all of us. And even though I talk about it, I'm conscious about it, and I actually knew it was happening as it was going. It wasn't kind of like oh my goodness, I can't believe I did this. It really was oh boy, this wasn't the original plan. However, but what did happen is that we, had to evaluate how it fit into the rest of the plan. How did, this additional time affect other things? And ultimately, there's a few things that changed in the priorities to make it work. But it's important to remember what, comes back to my favorite line, what is the objective? And as we make decisions for 2024, I want you to keep coming back to that. I want you to keep coming back to the what is the objective? Because when we keep the objective in mind, we really can know whether it's the right or wrong decision. I actually had someone recently reach out. And so, a little bit of back history for our new listeners. And a little update. We're actually making some changes on our agency side and dividing. We're actually creating 2 companies out of what used to be 1. More on that in a future episode. And so we have, the marketing media services are going to 1 company and the bookkeeping services are going to another. Historically, they have all been 1 company. And you know what? Although I have always pushed back on niching down, and our niche is still quite wide, what starts to happen is it's actually hard to market such diverse services at the same time. So we've decided to split them up. And on our marketing side, I often talk about the bookkeeping side, but on the marketing side, we had someone reach out about SEO services recently. And I went through the process of doing an audit on their website. We always offer a complimentary audit, and made some recommendations. And one of the pieces that I, gave some feedback on was the keywords, the titles of the pages, and the meta descriptions. And the receiving end really took that to mean that I was being very critical of their web designer. And, got the web designer involved, that, their work was being criticized, maybe it was incorrect, this and that. And so what we really had to come back to and discuss was that the objective of an SEO service and the objective of a web designer are actually 2 very different things. And so while the web designer had fulfilled their scope of creating a website that had a beautiful brand presence, that was on brand, that conveyed the values and the services and all of these pieces, which they had done very well, they did not factor in SEO optimization. And so, I mention this because this is a very common misunderstanding. And we have to remember who is working for what objective. And so in this case, the web designer is designing for the human eye, for the business owners. SEO experts are ultimately designing for database, bot optimization, search optimization, which has nothing to do with aesthetics. So you have 2 different people. And so, it's very interesting because 2 different objectives and when we're working on the same site, oftentimes those can misalign. The most optimized site sometimes isn't as beautiful. And sometimes the most beautiful site is really not optimized. And so we have to decide which objective is more important, or decide if we're really comfortable with a middle ground option. And, sometimes we say, hey, this is important to me. I really want to not include this on the homepage because I really don't I think it's very distracting to the brand. I do want to include this information over on this page because that's really great for optimization for that specific keyword. And so, how does this tie together? How does the studio story, which is is a bit funny to start the year off with, immediately really being a little bit what felt like behind. And, this SEO versus web designer story, how do these align? And it really comes back to keeping the objective in mind. And I have said it with so many guests, I've said it on so many episodes. Ultimately, keeping the objective in mind actually is so critical to every business decision. Upcoming episodes, we're going to talk to, money experts, hiring experts, talent acquisition, operations, all of these different pieces. And it always comes back to, what is the objective? How does it relate to your business? How can we create the most success by, however you manage success based on your objectives? And so sometimes we have a clash of objectives in the case of the web designer and the SEO expert, or in the case of, do we finish the studio that wasn't really in the plan, or do we hold off because in the end it did delay some other deadlines? The business owner has to, the buck stops with the business owner. That end decision, there's no right or wrong answer on some of these things. Whether or not we have the new studio, whether we don't. Ultimately, does it prevent us from continuing? No. Does not doing it prevent us from leveling up the content, which was the plan? Yes. And so, it's one of those pieces. We have to keep the objective in mind, and we have to lay out the path and the plan. So, it's the very beginning of 2024. Now, if you're listening to this episode a little later in the year, no problem. But what I want you to do is take a moment and really think about the end of the year. Fast forward to New Year's of 2024, New Year's Eve, and think about what is worth celebrating. What is, the objective that would make you feel successful? Because every person measures success in a different way. Every person has different objectives that support their life. Some people want to work, so many hours. Some people ultimately want to work less hours. Some people, their objective is to, hit a certain revenue target within a certain number of hours each week. And so, could they make more? Yes. But would they have to work more? Yes. And that doesn't support their objectives. So we really have to lay out what is worth celebrating. And the beginning of the year is always a perfect time to think, what is my objective and what is worth celebrating? And then build the roadmap. If you don't have a business budget yet for 2024, now is the perfect time to sit down and lay it out. Now, we offer complimentary budgeting sessions for our clients that meet certain requirements. And so, if you work with another bookkeeping provider or fractional CFO type service, now is a great time to ask if they offer these, or perhaps if you have in-house bookkeeping, you could talk to your controller, whoever's in charge of your finances. Now is the time to sit down and look at the budget and lay out, what resources do you require to hit your goal to celebrate that win? So often we see people set goals. I want to sell $1 million this year, but they have no idea how many billable hours it takes to hit that goal, how much profit based on the current profit margin they will make. So often businesses are more profitable when they're smaller than when they're bigger. It takes a lot of overhead as a business grows. Even, in certain instances, people say, no, I'll keep it tight. There are so many reasons why businesses become more expensive, but just as an example, the employer health tax in BC, British Columbia, in Canada, only applies to businesses that have over $500,000 in wages every year. So, if you cross, now that's where they've laid out the threshold. If you have crossed over 500,000 in wages, then you're considered big enough to pay this tax. So immediately it costs you more to employ those people than if you only paid 490,000 in wages. And so, things like that are a perfect example. Lots of different states have different requirements. Sometimes it's a certain number of employees, sometimes it's a certain amount of wages. Typically, if you have a bigger team, you require more people to manage them. If you have a bigger team, you require more marketing in order to fill those. Now, oftentimes, more marketing requires different strategies, more management of the marketing. It's less basic. And so there's lots of different reasons why businesses become less nimble, less maneuverable as they get bigger. And so, if the objective is more sales, that's great. But do we also know how that affects sustainability? Do we also know how does that affect the profit? Do we know how that affects the team? So, and when I talk about sustainability, sure, there is environmental sustainability, but when I refer to sustainability, I more commonly mean the sustainability of the business practices. Are we creating a business that is scalable? Are we creating a business that the business owner has to work 24 hours a day? Is the business owner doing the bookkeeping with one hand, answering client calls with another hand, and actually on site doing the work? Things like that work in short spurts. And as a business owner, we all go through times where we have to just put our head down and get it done. Perhaps someone on the team is sick. Maybe someone departed unexpectedly. Maybe you landed a big job and you don't want to turn it down, even though you're maybe not completely staffed for it. These are all reasons why as business owners, we have to level it up and just get it done. But we have to know that those are the techniques, those are the pieces, those are the level of hours and effort that are required in short spurts. Those are the sprints. We can't do the marathons of those because what ends up happening, burnout, health is affected, sleep is affected, other things, other parts of the business are affected. And so it doesn't support the end objective. Keeping the objective in mind is your biggest, most important piece for 2024. If we keep the objective in mind, decisions, left or right, yes or no, become much easier because one of your decisions each time will support the objective in a better way. Guys, that's all for today. I hope that you can truly lean into 2024, create massive impact, massive success. I hope that you choose the items on your list that you want to level up, that you want to dig into. Maybe it's new studio, maybe it's additional content, maybe it's new services, new education, all of these types of things. Whatever it is, 2024 is the year to do it. So thanks for joining us on the podcast. Be sure to leave us a review. And until next time, that's all. Be sure to also follow the show by going to any podcast app and searching Service-Based Business Society. Click subscribe, click the 5th star, and leave us a written review. Have a great week, and we will see you soon.